to all Somalilanders and to our fellow African brothers and sisters and to the international community. You say Eid Mubarak. Have a nice weekend, a good weekend. Hopefully, it's a Friday. It is Eid. It shows our dedication to pushing and telling the truth. We want to destroy Somalia's lies. I see Burakid here. Burakid, welcome. I'm just going to quickly talk about the topic we're discussing, as it says on the title, America's travel ban to Somalia and Somalia's false claims to territorial integrity. Those are our main two topics. I am going to focus mainly on Somalia's fake claims to territorial integrity. We've seen Somalia throw a tantrum because of the White House's. The White House has used the correct map where they didn't put Somaliland as part of the ban. Yes, so that's one of the topics that we're going to talk about. Yeah, but I'll say your opinion. You can do an opening. And yes, express your opinion. Expect your. I mean, Eid Mubarak to you as well. By the way, Eid Mubarak to you, Abdullah. Eid Mubarak. But yeah, come. You have.
Okay. Eid Mubarak. Yeah, the travel ban is something that was expected. I posted about this a while ago, back in October, when President Trump was campaigning in Iowa. That's when he made the announcement. Uh, he was in the state of Iowa that night. So he made that promise back in October that he was planning. Yeah, the travel ban is something that, like the video that I posted back in October, Donald Trump already made that promise back in October, about 8 months ago, that he was going to ban Somalia. So he's just keeping his promise to the American people because he does not like Somalia. Because Somalia, right now, even the State Department is changing its rules and everything because the world is getting tired of the irresponsible acts, the continuous lies, corruption, everything. So uh, this was expected. Trump already made that promise a long time ago, and he did this the first term too. So right now he wants to make it permanent, so that way other presidents after him don't change the rules. So he does not want Somalia to come in. So we'll see. But as far as I'm concerned, uh, the ban, Somaliland, right now, they're working with the United States very closely. I have been sending letters. I contacted Rich and a couple other representatives, and all of them. If you guys get a chance, you guys can email them too. You don't have to necessarily be living in the USA to do that. You can email them from the UK, and I suggest a lot of people start doing that too. That'll be very important.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But I think we have a bit more people. If that's okay, I'm just going to pause you for a minute so I can talk about the topic. I never really wanted to speak about the travel ban, but I've seen a BBC document where they've just highlighted the countries that are banned. I think 10 countries. They included Somalia's map and not Somaliland. I've seen Somalia's incompetent government then complain about that. And obviously, BBC had to add Somaliland into it. Based on territorial integrity. And we're seeing this claim of territorial integrity flying around since 2024. Probably was happening behind closed doors, but now Somalia is openly lying to the international community and claiming territorial integrity. The second reason I wanted to talk about this, I was in an African platform led by an African journalist, I've seen a lot of Africans that were angry, disappointed with the West and America, for example. One of the things that I wanted to address, I wasn't given the mic, but I will address it here, just in case if there's any other African brothers are here, and I think it's important to to have the freedom of speech and also to address a couple of things. One of the gentlemen talked about how America was the cause that caused devastation to Somalia, and America was the reason Somalia is destroyed until now. I do want to correct that narrative because I think this victim card that's being played by a lot of African countries is getting boring and is getting tired. I'm getting tired of it, to be honest. First of all, in 1987, America was supplying weapons to and supporting Siad Barre all the way to 1987. It was until 1987 when they stopped this due to the genocide he was openly committing. Not one African country has spoken about that genocide. Not one African country had actually, spoke about this genocide or raised an alarm bell on what was happening. It was actually Israel that first did that. So shame on the African Union. Shame on many African countries that claim to be a victim of colonial powers. They may be, but I think there's nothing worse than the current African Union. It was 1887 when they stopped supplying weapons to Somalia. In 1888, the liberation movement, the SNM, won. They left 1 million plus mines within the borders between Djibouti and Somaliland. They left another many mines across the borders between Ethiopia and Somaliland. Clear indication of ethnic cleansing, clear indication of genocide, because they didn't want civilians to even cross to the safety lines of Ethiopia. Again, not a word from the so-called African Union, not a word from any so-called African countries that are claiming that these Western power are the worst. I did want to reflect the other thing. Somalia does continue to claim a territorial integrity. This union and territorial integrity that it claims over Somaliland. Again, the African Union did an internal fact finding in 2005, where they said there was no union between Somalia and Somaliland. They talked about the Isaac genocide in that report. I think they also spoke about Somalia's right for continuity of statehood and how this will not affect the African. This will not affect. Will not be it's not a secessionist movement. It then continued to collect dust. We had a British politician speak about this. In 2007, he went to the African Union and asked about the African Union fact-finding. The African Union responded that Somaliland is a breakaway, and recognizing Somaliland, it will be a Pandora's box, and it will encourage other secessionists. The response of the British and the British gentleman was, Somaliland is not a secessionist movement. In fact, Somaliland is a country that gained independence in 26th of June 1960. The response was for political reasons. It will upset many other reasons. Again, for such an union, an African Union, an absolute disaster of a place to represent Africans. It does not care about human lives, does not value human lives, it prioritizes corruption, prioritizes whoever's going to pay more. They're willing to hide and cover for anybody as long as you pay this much. So 7.2 million, so 7.8 million Somalilanders, almost 20 years on, are still stateless, are still in an open prison, are still in a situation where there's no health, there's no education. You can sit here and say Somaliland is a democracy, blah blah blah, all which is beautiful. These are part of our history. Somaliland is an empire. We are a sultanate that existed more than 300 years. You can go as far as a land of Punt, and the pharaohs would come to Somaliland almost 1,000 years ago. We are 1,400 years ago, the first place where the Prophet's friends had made a hijrah, and we were an empire that existed back then. So I think for where was I going with African Union? I was in a platform that was just trashing, and I was so angry with America, but yet are not able to hold themselves accountable. Recently, the African Union came together along with the UN to absolutely corrupt organizations. came together to hold colonial powers accountable for the atrocities that they committed against the African Union, against the Africans, yet again failed to invite Somalilanders. This was all about making money, nothing to do with progressing Africans, nothing to do with a better Africa. Sorry, 1 minute, I have to. Guys, one minute. I wanted to also talk about one last point. I do, as a Somalilander, and as a country that I wanna hopefully at some point. So I would really encourage Somaliland for not join the African Union once our recognition is done. I think we need to create a different African Union, and an African Union that does not take 70% or 75% from foreign aid, that relies on foreign countries, that pushes foreign countries' agenda. I think we need to make something like the Gulf Union, where successful countries in Africa can actually unite and can do something productive. I do see African Union as a bloodthirsty, genocidal entity and a sympathizer to genocide that doesn't acknowledge any genocide or any atrocities that's happening within Africa unless it's recognized by the very evil Western powers that they claim. That's my statement to the previous talk, the previous life I was at. It was an African life, and it was poor me. Why should I be banned? In terms of the African ban, I wanted to focus on territorial integrity and Somali territorial integrity. Now, when we talk about territorial, we need to do lessons for dummies. I think we need to do lessons on dummies because Somalia has lied so much for 65 years. We have to slowly break it down. And I'm going to take a breath and pass it on to Burra for a minute, and I'll come back. But we want to focus on territorial integrity, and what is it?
Yeah. Man, next time yeah, you left good. Never mind. The space is recorded. I don't want to say anything. I was gonna say
Okay,
something,
no,
but
no problem.
I don't want to
No,
open
no,
up
no. We save it. We save it. We save it. We save it. I will ask Lin Maan to come along, or Adna or Landa. I want to show a couple
Just
of things.
remember to tell everybody just to stick to the topic. Genocide key. Waxaan kale naga daayo today, please.
No, it'll be fine. Don't worry. We are sticking to the topic. I wanted to talk about what is territorial integrity. Somalia claims territorial integrity, but Somalia shares borders with Ethiopia, has no defined borders in that. In 18, and again, you can see I've shared the information at the bottom. We Somalilanders, we come with facts. We do not make claims. We come with facts. When we have been dealing with 65 years of an entity that is not only genocidal but is a complicit liar, and an entity that took everything from a fascist Italy, but everything that was bad, and are using if you continue to lie enough, if you continue to lie, people will end up believing you. I'm disappointed, and I'm not as disappointed with the Americans as I am with Somaliland politicians. We heard the American politicians say that they had to respect Somalia's territorial integrity. And I think for the next few weeks, we will explain what is territorial integrity. Somalia has no borders with Ethiopia because it actually believed that Ethiopia was under its administration. In 1987, in 1887, they tried to define a border between Ethiopia and Somalia. They didn't agree on that. They then decided to do the same thing in 1808. In 1908, again, there was no agreement up to that. We know as early as 1930s, Italy had a mission to create what you call a Greater Somalia, and even attacked Somaliland at the time in World War II, where they lost. So they've never had the intention to create borders, but Italy was able to make borders between Ethiopia and Eritrea, but not Somalia and Ethiopia. Again, this is a question to anybody who understands international law. How is Somalia a state that is recognized, is recognized by America, but at the same time, is Somalia a country? If you do not have defined borders, how is Somalia a country? When is Somalia's Independence Day? Who gave Somalia independence? Those are questions that is important to be asked. Somaliland's borders are defined, whether it's and I will share those at the bottom as well. I will take a breath, guys. I can't breathe. I think I've overspoken.
Okay,
But
that's a good. You left it somewhere good,
let me,
Miss Alva.
yeah, let me
Uh,
give it to, if I can bring up Lean Man for a minute. And Lean Man, I
okay,
don't know if you're celebrating Eid and you don't want to come up. Anybody who wants to come up, come up. And Burakid, you're more than welcome to speak for a few minutes and I'll come back. Because I want to show
okay.
things with evidence and the dates and all that stuff.
So, like I was telling you guys the other day, uh, uh, um, a company that's called Price and Water did an investigation recently and submitted the reports to the United States government. Price and Water, what they do, they specialize in surveillance. So they found out that these people use cryptocurrency. The first step is they get the money in the US and it gets deposited in Kenya. There's lawyers in Kenya. I posted one of the lawyers, one of the groups in Nairobi. They create a shell company for them under Kenyan law. So that shell company gets the money deposited. So basically, once the money gets deposited into the shell company, then it gets diverted into cryptocurrency. Once it gets diverted into cryptocurrency, they use what they call, I forgot the name of it, consultancy. So they have consultancy office. In Uganda, they have a consultancy office in Addis Ababa. They have several in Kenya. And that's where they transfer like 60,000, 80,000, 300,000, things like that. And that's the money that they use to bribe when the African Union to write reports to favor them. Same thing with other staff, whether it's UN or so. This is the thing that the United States just found out less than 2 months ago. So it's very concerning. At the same time, it shows you how corrupt the African Union is. I mean, we already knew that to a certain extent because they make their money from Somalia. Most of their income comes from Somalia. Whether it's their soldiers getting top salary, their commanders, and the countries, getting the contracts. They make billions in this. So it's crazy that they're double dipping. They're getting that money from the U.S. and the rest of it is covered by Europe. At the same time, some of these staff are also getting bribe money on the side. So it's a lot of nasty stuff going on. And I completely agree with you. Somaliland, once it gains its recognition, like they need to make sure they stay away from Africa. The African Union is extremely corrupt. And by these reports, you can tell. Also, when you go on the U.S. Treasury, you will see how many people got sanctioned. So it's a
Thank
lot of
you.
things you got
I think you're breaking up
going
a
on.
little bit. Bura, your line is breaking up a little bit. So if I'm okay, I'm just gonna quickly get on with this one. Go back to the territorial integrity. So at the bottom, I've shared about Somalia's territorial integrity. You could see here in the that there's not been an agreement between Somalia and Italy and Ethiopia or Abyssinia at the time. Twice they've tried and it hasn't worked out. Now I want to specify the exact dates of Somaliland's territory, and these are territories that were agreed between the colonial power between Britain and and the other colonial powers that are neighboring countries. So there's the Anglo-French Treaty, and that's 1888. There's the Anglo-Italian Treaty, that's in 1894. And there's the Anglo-Ethiopian Treaty, that's 1897. I want to just quickly define what is territorial integrity. And territorial integrity and in African territorial integrity refers to the idea past colonial African states must maintain borders they inherited at independence, no matter how artificial or problematic these borders are. This principle is strongly upheld by the African Union that was originally set by the predecessors of the OG, the OG Africa, the Organized African Union in 1963. I do have a video in the African Summit, but I couldn't share it on here. But the previous African Summit in 2024, where Hassan Sheikh claimed that it is against the African Union Charter 1963 for Ethiopia to sign an MOU with Somaliland. Now, I've stated Somaliland's colonial borders, and these borders have not been changed and cannot be changed. And here it states these, no matter how problematic these borders, cannot be changed. Also, I think what's important historically, that Somaliland was a protectorate, not a colonial. So Somaliland has formed the deal with Britain in 1888, 2 years before the Scramble of Africa, almost 3 years before the Scramble of Africa, and those borders were agreed upon. You can find these documents within the British Parliament where they discussed that the Sultanate at the time, the Somaliland Sultanate, have agreed that these borders were not to be changed, and these are the borders that they've already controlled at the time. So these are not artificial borders. These are not artificial borders that was created by the British. Actually, the British came to borders that were already defined in 1881, that was already under the Sultanate, within the agreements of the people. So my disappointment is that in an African Union in 2024, those statements was made by Hassan Sheikh. It was gone unchallenged by the African Union, and more disappointingly, it was gone unchecked by our own politicians who completely ignored that. You can hear on the African Union Summit 37, Hassan Sheikh claimed that his territorial integrity is being disrespected. He also claims that the 1963 borders should be respected, all which they actually didn't agree to. Somalia did not agree to those borders in 1963 because Somalia knew that the only rectified border they do have that exists, that's been defined, is the border between Somalia and Somaliland. That's the only border that they do actually have defined, and they didn't want to sign those agreements in 1963. I'm disappointed with our politician not addressing these lies. But then you see Hassan Hamza Barry again address the UN, state using the same words of territorial integrity as being violated. Again, the people have not asked for they've not asked for two huge institutions that are there to uphold international law, that are there to uphold charters. They have gone unchecked by. They've not checked whether these claims that both Hassan Sheikh or Hamza Barry, the Prime Minister, were made and whether they're factual or not. You then have the America, who recently in their hearing talked about Taiwan, but the way how they were able to protect Taiwan, but how they had to respect Somalia's territorial integrity. Disappointing because Somalia has been able and has managed to lie for so many years. But what's even more disappointing is to see Somaliland, a politician, completely not challenge any of those statements that have been persistently being repeated for the past 2 years now. So this is the second year, a year now since 2024 is being repeated, and God knows how many more years. The second part I wanted, and Lynn Ma'an will help me with this, that we need to challenge as well, is the UN seat and how Somalia was able to gain a UN seat, and how the UN seat is registered on the 26th of June 1960, which is Somaliland's Independence Day. And the treaties the treaties there are also based on 26th of June, and are treaties that are based on Somaliland's treaties with the UK. Again, those they have not been questioned, but I think Somalia has been able to lie to the world for very long. Lynn Ma'an, thank you for joining me, Walalo. I do want to ask you to just do a breakdown. What is Somalia? What is Somaliland? And just the history. Can we start from, let's say, just before 1960 and all the way to 1960?
Kind of long, to be honest. I think we've all read it by now. We know that Somalia is not.
But Liman, this is I don't want to call it Somaliland for dummies. I want to call it I want to call it a territorial integrity for dummies.
From the beginning, this is really not about This is about international fraud. Somalia is fraud, and it impersonates sovereign states. It impersonates Somaliland. It uses, her documents. So when people say stuff like territorial integrity or the one Somalia policy or their successionists, how? Where are the treaties? What union happened? And what are you? You're a trusteeship. So there was no union in 1960, and that lie has been going for over 60 years. So if you break it down, it starts with the 26th of June when Somaliland became fully sovereign from Britain. It was recognized as by 35 countries. It has a government, defined territory, population, enters into diplomatic relations. And then you go to the 1st of July, it is Somalia Italiana trusteeship. Yeah, it does not have sovereignty. It does not have the legal capacity to even sign treaties. And what you find is, I saw that post by Zakaria where they said Italian Somaliland. That is the tactics they use to cover the fact that they don't have treaties. So since they don't have treaties, they put in there Italian Somaliland, British Somaliland, just to confuse people with the fact that these people are a trusteeship. So they don't have the legal capacity to even sign treaties, let alone join a sovereign nation. They are a trusteeship. So that is where the red flag starts. Like that should be a red flag for you. You're not sovereign. How did you unite with a sovereign nation? you know. And then if you go further down, it goes to 1960, 1961. No act of union was signed between the two states. There was no ratification by Somalian parliament. The union was never registered under UN Charter Article 102. That means there's no merger, there's no legal standing, there is no legitimacy. So this is just international fraud. That is what's going on here. It is just state impersonation. So if you then try to attach the law to the crimes that these people are committing, it's quite a few of them. First is UN Charter Article 102. So every treaty, every international agreement entered into by any member of the United Nations shall be registered with the Secretariat and published by it. So if it's not registered, it cannot be a member of the UN. It cannot invoke the United Nations. So if Somaliland now goes to the UN and asks for legal clarification on the situation, how can Somalia invoke how can they invoke their territorial integrity? You don't even have a treaty registered there. They're like literal fraud. They don't have no treaties. They can't invoke what's the word? Territorial integrity. They're not sovereign. They can't do nothing. It's fraud. Article 102. They're not that. And then it's the other one. It's the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. And it says a treaty is void if it is concluded by a party lacking legal capacity or give consent. Sorry, I said that wrong. Or if the consent was not valid. So, for example, Somalia never gave consent, so it's not valid. So that's why it comes under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. But it's void anyway, because the first part says it cannot be concluded by a party lacking legal capacity. They don't have legal capacity. They're a trusteeship. And then you go down to the Montevideo Convention, define population, define territory, governance. They have none of this capacity. Well, they use Somaliland's independence to do that, but they don't have defined territory. Their borders are wide open from Ethiopia to Somaliland. From Ethiopia to Somalia, it's open. There's no borders. Why is there no borders? They don't ask themselves. It's because the 1st of July is a fraud. They never received their independence. And if you don't receive it, you don't have internationally recognized borders. Somaliland has internationally recognized borders because they are the 26th of June 1960. Somaliland has everything. Somalia didn't have the 1st of July. It's not even registered because till this day, they are UN trust territory. So What happened is just international fraud. It is a lie. And this isn't unity. It's just like, state impersonation. Really, that's all it is. It's state impersonation, you know?
You
Also,
know, man, we just sent letters to the U.S. State Department. So
yeah, but the
I don't
problem,
Bro,
know if
one
you
minute,
read
1 minute.
that.
But guys, 1 minute. I do want to ask because I want this to be an interactive where I can ask Lina Ma'an a question. Lina Ma'an, my question will sorry, bro, but my question to you, Lina Ma'an, is Somalia. What was Somalia? The Italian look. We know it as Somalia. We understand that Somalia and Italian Somalia are exactly the same thing. We know the name Somalia, the name Italian Somalia, Somaliland was used to kind of confuse people. Is used to, to cause a confusion and for people to think, okay, there was an Italian Somaliland and British Somaliland, and they became Somalia. But in reality, we all know that this place, Italian Somaliland, is actually just Somalia. That's changed its name. Now, when you look at the UN, when you look at the UN search, UN trusteeship, countries that were under UN trusteeship in the 60s and in the 50s, Italian Somaliland is under there. In the UN, it states, again, when you click on it, it says it says British Protectorate Somaliland and Italian Somaliland became Somalia. Now, we understand there are countries that have united in a legal way, in a legitimate way, i.e., Tanzania is a legal union, legitimate union, meets the Article 102 of the UN Charter, and also meets that, and they're registered with the UN, and it's a clear. It states the independent states of Zanzibar. Like, it doesn't say a British protectorate Zanzibar. It says Zanzibar and it says Tanganyika joined together and they form Tanganyika and Tanzania Republic. And then they changed their name to Tanzania. Whereas for when it comes to Somaliland, well, by the 1st of July, there was no such thing as British Protectorate Somaliland, because British Protectorate Somaliland would have been the Republic of Somaliland, the state of Somaliland, a country that's already received 35 recognition by 35 countries, including all permanent members of UN Security Council. So can you kind of explain that part? Like, how were they able to confuse the UN? I mean, how
no, it
were
was
we
the
able to challenge
Italians.
that?
Somalia didn't do it themselves, so they cannot explain their 1st of July having no independence treaties. So they changed the name from Somalia Italiana Trusteeship to Italian Somaliland, just to make it seem like they're the same people. It's just confusion. But it's just Somalia. That's all it is. They changed the name. So they started using that just to confuse people. Oh, these people are the same people, kind of thing. They all got their independence, but it's not true. They're the trustee of Somalia Italiana. And then all of a sudden the document says Italian Somaliland because Somaliland got independence. So they can continue to use your paperwork. That's how probably they stole their UNC, to be honest. They just changed the wording and said some Italian Somaliland. That's all they did. So
But Lin Man, yeah, would you say it's similar to, for example, Nigeria was a British, was under the colonial British. Nigeria was under the British. They gained their independence, and then when it comes to British Cameroon, Northern British Cameroon, they were only given an option whether to be either part of Cameroon, an ex-French colonial, or to merge with Nigeria. So do you think the international community assumed that Somaliland obviously gained its independence and Somalia was to become whatever the name that they use, Somaliland, Italian Somaliland, was to go under the recognition of Somaliland? But then they've twisted
that's
everything.
a continuation of neocolonialism because the British records are very clear that Somaliland was to get its independence, and what they do after that, they are sovereign people, they can do what they want. So any idea of that we were going to join, that came afterwards. Britain never said, oh, we're going to make sure they join. No, they had no intention, in fact, of even recognizing a country called Somalia, because in 1947 They made Italy give up all the Ethiopian territories. That's the Ogaden, Somalia, and they make them pay compensation. So there are treaties saying that all this land, Ogaden, Somalia, in 1947 was Ethiopia. The treaties are there and they're registered at the UN. So where do you tell me that there were plans to do that when Britain clearly didn't want to do that? They already gave the land to Ethiopia and they made them pay compensations in the million. So all that narrative is just now. These people can't justify the fact that they don't have independence. They're using somebody else's. So you can't change history. You have to follow the facts, really. Even the Howden Reserve is not even registered at the UN. There is no sovereignty transfer. But Britain made sure the sovereignty transfer was given to Ethiopia in 1947. So that tells you clearly what the intention was. They wanted the Howden Reserve, and when Somaliland becomes independent, for them to return the Howd from Ethiopian administration. That is legal, historical fact. Anything else is confusion. It's the Italians, it's neocolonialism. Oh, this is Italian Somaliland. That's all bullshit. Because why didn't Italy just give them their independence? Why didn't they write the treaties? They didn't do that. What is the reason for that? So no, I don't believe.
Thank you. Yeah. No, Lean Man, thank you. And I do want to ask a second question. In terms of, obviously, like I've read up, when once a country becomes a de jure state, it remains de jure unless you forfeit your statehood, which never happened to Somaliland. Can you explain what happened in 1960 to Somaliland? Look, we have to imagine that there's a lot of people that don't know Somaliland's story. So break it down. What happened from 1960, 26th of June, we celebrate to regain our independence. 35 countries were sending a congratulation letter, including America, including so many, and China, Iraq, Israel. So many countries have congratulated Somaliland and were recognized Somaliland's existence. Comes to 1st of July, what was our intention? What did Somaliland want it to? What did we want to do about after 26th of June? What was our plan? We became an independent country. We're sovereign. We control every bit of our territory. We are an independent country, and no different to America, no different to Britain, no different to any other independent country in the world. What was our plan? What would you say the plan was for us, for Somaliland?
Well, I know a lot of people didn't want to join Somalia. I'm sure there were some political groups in Hargeisa at the time, but most people didn't really want to. Somaliland got its full de jure independence on the 26th of June. Our UN seat, the paperwork was sent. I forgot the guy's name, the guy that actually sent it. So when it was sent there, Queen Elizabeth sent out the congratulations. We all seen it. She said, we look forward to seeing you at the UN, and working as partners in the future. So the intention was for Somaliland to become independent. But what happened at the UN is the Italians got our paperwork. And when the Italians got the paperwork, they said Somaliland and Somalia have united, And they never checked if there was a treaty. They never checked if there was like a union. They never even checked if Somalia was really sovereign, if they got their independence. Nothing was registered. So it seems to be a united UN era, because the UN, as we know, doesn't recognize countries. They only file the paperwork and treaties. That's what they do. So their job was to check the paperwork. So it seems like it's a administrative error, I think. Sorry, I can't say the word administrative. But yeah,
Yes. No, you said it perfect, Jack. I understood.
Yeah, so
administrative.
Administrative. Administrative. Yes. Yes.
My question is, many of us would know, and the international community was anticipating a Somali republic, no different to the Arab Republic. That was the expectation for that to happen. We understand in 1933, after Somaliland's uprising in 1961, Somalilanders' army, the Camel Code, had an uprising against the occupying forces of Somalia. these gentlemen, 21 gentlemen, were all arrested. They then had to face a British judge in Mogadishu in 1963. And one of his findings was that Somali Republic was an illusion. It was something that everyone in the international community have heard of. But actually, there was no documents. It was almost a de facto. There was no legal agreements. There was nothing there. What's your opinion on this? And can you elaborate a little bit on that? And if there's any other uprisings that have happened? I am aware of another uprising of 38 people that have died in Hargeisa that were doing peaceful protests that were anti the union. Liman, can you just talk about that a little bit, if that's okay?
Yeah, so as a sovereign nation, you don't have to join the UN and join straight away. That's your choice. You don't really have to. But what's illegal and where the fraud is when somebody else takes your paperwork and sits on your seat. And that's basically what happened. In 1961, I think, reer Somaliland waa la seexiyey. Waxaa lagu yidhi the Somali Republic, but it was never registered at the UN, African Union, the UNC 1960, 1st of July, waxay ku qoran Somalia. That was our paperwork. So they made reer Somaliland believe there was a union, and they would write on the passport Somalia and write underneath it the Somali Republic. But there is no such thing as the Somali Republic. Why do we even still talk about it? Till this day, it has never existed. Yeah, it was something that lagu seexinayo passport lagu qoray, so they keep talking about a union. So that was the first trick. I think Igal said it. That was the first trick that they played on us. There has never been a Somali Republic. Yeah, so that was the first trick they played. It didn't exist. So by the time it was 1961, there was uprisings, and they had a referendum, and they rejected a union. Somalia Italiana used our, remember, they are a trusteeship. They used our because they're sitting on our UN seat. So they used our documents, right? And they can't justify sitting on that UN seat. They wrote a union from Mogadishu with no signatures from the government of Somaliland and registered it at the UN. But they are a trusteeship. They can't even register it. You need to use the 1st of July, your documents. They couldn't do it. They did it without paperwork. So that's really what they did. But there's laws about that. I think it's called treaty fraud. It's basically state impersonation and treaty fraud. You know? That's what they did.
What would you say our Somalilanders are requesting? When you think about Somaliland activists, what are we demanding right now? Some would say we want re-recognition. Some would say restoration of independence or re-recognition. You use a beautiful word that I think a lot of people like. What would you describe our, for example, would you say we're seeking continuity of statehood, or would you say something slightly different?
No, it's called retrospective recognition. And that is the best recognition for Somaliland, because it will change the history of that it will go back in history, and it will tell the world that these people never existed and they stole documents and there never was a union. That's retrospective. So it's not political recognition, it's retrospective. It goes back so that in history, it's they're gonna laga masaxaya Soomaali waxaa la oranaya waa dadkii dadkan xasuuqay waraaqahooda la carreeyeen. These people are not even a country.
So can you repeat that in English where you talked about genocide there in Somali? Just because we probably do have a lot of non-Somalilander listeners. We have many international support.
Yeah, so I mean,
we want them to understand our story in English, since English is shared by so many countries. What would you say? Yes, just repeat what you said in English, please. Sorry, man. Look, we're too comfortable speaking Somali. Go on.
I wrote a piece about retrospective, but I also want to compare it to other countries. So how do people solve a problem of there is no union, but they claim us? What they do is they send a letter to the United Nations General Assembly through legal channels. They send it to them, whether it's a sponsor state. So it could be Taiwan. That's what Kosovo did. That's what everybody does. And they ask them for the legal clarifications of the status of Somaliland, and that is what a lot of other countries also have done. I think it was the Senegambia. Gambia left, and there was no war. They just proved there never was a union, so their sovereignty was restored. I think the same thing with Syria. They proved there never was a union, so their sovereignty was restored. Um, there are other examples as well, Malaysia and Singapore. So none of these people were called separatists. None of these people were called secessionists. They just went to the UN and got legal clarification, and their sovereignty was restored. So why are we not doing that, really? That is the question that I have. Why are we not doing that?
I think that's a question for our politician. But I think that's an important question to our politician. I think 34 years they've tried diplomacy, it hasn't worked. And I think the world, to some extent, when I look at America, respect Somalia's claims of territorial integrity, I'm like, this is good. International law works. And this should encourage our politicians to be say, you know what, this is a lie, and we can show you that this is a lie, and our rights should be claimed back. When you talk about, you kind of touched on the genocide, and you are someone who's Isaac, who has gone particularly through the Isaac genocide. For me, I love to talk about the Isaac genocide. You know why? Somalia is a country that denies these genocides. Somalia is a country that I recently talked about the 1 million mines that happened that's around Somalia. Some of them are still not, that are still active. And I think 3 years ago, I had a close family member was driving through from Sela to Djibouti. It's not a family member. It's somebody who's a friend of a friend. Like one of his friends was a truck driver. Who took the wrong lane, and he'd lost his life because those mines are still active today. You hear so many people that are losing their lives in these mines within Somaliland. It's not acknowledged. So I think to the crimes that they've committed against Somaliland, but to then now call us against secessionists, and Turkey was talking about, their think tank was talking about how they are supplying Somalia with drones to fight out terrorists and to fight secessionists. For us as Somalilanders, we understand what they say secessionist. Secessionist is not me. I'm not secessionist. Although I am a Somalilander, but I'm from older region. I'm from a region where Fiqi has openly said, take a gun and you drop the pen and take a gun and predominantly go kill the Isaac people that you share the country with. This is what he was asking. This is what he was demanding for people from my region to do. The secessionists, to them, secessionists are the Isaac people, the very people that have gone through a genocide. Funny enough, and what I've heard the head of the UN, and he was talking about people in Kosovo who have experienced a genocide. He was talking about how they were getting threats online, how people were using they were using hurtful words towards these people in Kosovo. And he said, we will do whatever it takes to protect those people. And I found it ironic that the very people that I share a country with, my fellow people that are from Isaac, do not have the same protection. You have somebody, a foreign minister, whether it's a Fiqi, who's in America's watch list for being part of Al-Shabaab, openly on Twitter saying, this is the end of secessionism. We will end them, when he did a visit to Las Anod. You then see him provide weapons to our Las Anod region. These same weapons are weapons that were, and again, he was begging a few days for the international community to give him weapons. These are weapons that were paid by Western taxpayers, whether it's America, whether it's the UK, and many other countries, contributed for Somalia to be fighting terrorists, not to cause instability within Somaliland. Again, it's gone unchallenged. And this is what frustrates me with our government. It frustrates me that they are silent, that we still have people that are going through a genocide. They are still being targeted for who they are. These people are getting killed because they are Isaac. Let's be very frank and let's be very honest. And they say it openly on TV. But anybody who is not a Somalilander, who is not a Somali speaker, search the word Isaac whenever they do. If you don't write Isaac, they write Idor. Somebody write on the comments and you will see it. These are people that are unapologetic. They're not apologetic about their genocide. They're very open about what they want to do to Somaliland and how they want to destroy Somaliland. But they want to target one group and isolate one group, and then later on claim all our land. In 1887, in 1987, in 1987, a report by Siad Barre, when they thought they got rid of so many South, they then wrote my tribe, Samaron, and another tribe that lives in Somaliland, Warsangali, and there are these two tribes. We worry that they will empathize with what's happening with the Isaac, because these two believe that the northern region, which is Somaliland, belongs to them. So these people are willing to ethnically completely cleanse whoever lives in Somaliland because it's a strategic location. It is good. And this brings me to my point about the African Union and why I actually support America banning these African countries. Yes, African citizens do suffer, but we have a criminal institution that's called the African Union. The African Union is the very union that said we will not, that's letting the African Union fact find in 2005 that stated that Somaliland has a legal right to be re-recognized and Somaliland is not secessionist. They are allowing this to collect dust for political gains, for Djibouti not to be upset, for Egypt not to be upset, I think Libya at the same time not to be upset. They're allowing 7.8 million people to be stateless. And this is, what do you think about that? And that's my question to you. How do you feel as a Somalilander, as a citizen, as somebody who goes home and you see people our age, people that are either Gen Z or even slightly older, millennials, whatever age in Somaliland, younger, do not have health service, do not have the option of jobs. 75% of Somalilanders under age 30 do not have jobs. We don't have a basic healthcare. If I travel to Somaliland, my biggest worry is I don't do any extreme activities because I'm worried that there's no hospital. People travel and cross borders to whether to Ethiopia or to India. These are the people that have money. Many don't even have the money and will die because of because of simple things that could be easily treated. We are a country that's been occupied for 30 plus years, yet is still being punished by the international community with the support of African Union, with the support of the UN, who are ignoring what is rightfully ours, a re-recognition and acknowledging our existence. So going back to the African Union fact-finding, I think the British Parliament has spoken about it, and they've also said they will respect Somalia's territorial integrity. I'm not angry at the British, I'm not angry at the Americans, because they're expecting the African Union to do its job. They're expecting the UN to be doing its role, which is to keep and to respect international law. What's your opinion, Linda? And I'll pass the mic back to you.
Sorry, I was, so about Turkey. So what did you say about Turkey? Sorry, let me go back to the point.
Oh, Turkey. No, I talked about, I talked for a few hours.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the point of Turkey and the genocide. You said Turkey?
Yeah, Turkey stated that they're supplying Somalia with weapons. And for Somalia to find a secessionist, and I define what secessionist actually means, because I think it's important to define what secessionist means, and to fight Al-Shabaab. So they equated secessionism to Al-Shabaab, and they talked about drones and things like that that will be given. Somalia, a country that committed a genocide.
You have a United Nations trusteeship with no sovereignty, calling somebody secessionist. So Turkey themselves know, they're not stupid. Somalia don't have sovereignty. They know this. But they know they're getting oil, they're getting wealth, and they see Somaliland as a strategic location. They want to explore it and exploit it. And that is the reason. It is like neocolonialism. They're trying to take advantage of people. Do you understand? That's why we need our government to set the record straight so that we have legal clarification on the situation. Because I know Ethiopia knows. I know, not Egypt, sorry. I know Turkey knows. Because they had meetings over there. And then when they had meetings, Somalia was asked to prove where is the union? On what basis are they secessionists? Do you have anything? They cannot produce anything. But they have people calling them they have them call secessionists. They call people secessionists, but they have no proof. That is how probably they got a 90% oil deal. I'll be honest with you, because they don't have paperwork. And because they have no paperwork, they give everything away. So the point is, when you have... when you have retrospective recognition, it includes genocide. So if you get retrospective recognition, they will acknowledge the fact that these were sovereign people that were genocided by an outsider. These are war crimes. Do you understand? So retrospective recognition includes genocide. They will accept the fact that when they killed you, they killed a sovereign group of people, you know.
Thank you, Lin Ma'an. And lastly, what do you think about the African Union fact-finding and collecting dust? As you know, it's been 20 years now, but in 2007, it was asked by a British politician and MP, guys, please write his name down. I feel really bad. He's a good friend to Somaliland. And their response was, and when he confronted them that Somaliland is neither secessionist nor a breakaway, their response was, oh, it's a political, it will cause political tension and it is too political. What is your response to an organization that's not respecting its own UN Charter, or even not valuing human lives because it's making 7.2 million Somalilanders stateless?
I mean, the United Nations don't have no intention of fixing that situation. Although, in the past, if Somaliland was to speak to them in a legal manner, just on international law, they will quickly like apologize for that situation, you know. But we don't do that, and we don't put it on record. So that is just the issue. Why would they? In 1960, they let a country that had no independence, that was a trusteeship, that had no union documents, sit on a United Nations seat. That is an error on the UN. That is billions in compensation. Okay? So, and because of their error, a genocide happened. They are looking to, listen, if you add everything up, the UNC, the genocide, you're going over $150 billion. Okay? So they have incentive not to, stick with the status quo. They try to fix the mess. But it's up for our government to basically fix that situation. So I would just say getting retroactive recognition acknowledges that Somalia's occupation was illegal and not legitimate, and it would affirm the 1988 Isaac genocide was not an internal matter, but a war crime against sovereign people. So that's one thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so what we really need is for the government of Somaliland to send a letter to the United Nations General Assembly, and we just want the legal facts. And because everything we say is factual and it's backed up by law, they have to, if you send it through what are those people called that have UN seats? Yeah, a sponsor. If you send your letter like through a sponsor UN member state, they have to then register your letter and it becomes on record. And once it's on record, they have to follow their own procedures. And that is how everybody does it, by the way. Kosovo, when they wanted an ICJ opinion, they got a sponsor state. Anyone that, all these other countries that got their sovereignty returned, Egypt, Gambia, they went to the United Nations General Assembly. There is no veto in the United Nations General Assembly. There's no veto. It just gets voted on and they have to follow the law. So what's missing is us not speaking up, not going the legal route, because it has many benefits if we did that. Not only it would change the narrative on the international stage forever. That is one benefit. If you just do it for that, that's one benefit. Not only that, if you prove that there's no union, you restore your sovereignty. But not only that, if you also send the letter, you have, I can't remember which one it is. It's something 96. Anyway, so when you get an ICJ advisory opinion, it comes under something 96. It's some, it's, I don't know. But they will send a letter to the ICJ. So if you send off the letter, they look at it and they will send all your questions to the ICJ to get an advisory opinion. So you'll have that as well, and you'll be able to take your case to the ICJ. So you have like three things that's there in front of you. One is changing the international narrative, you know. Yeah, here it is. Once
Yeah, oh,
I
you've got.
found it. Sorry, it's called Once Passed the General Assembly formally passes the legal question to the ICJ under the Article 96 of the UN Charter. Yes, it's Article 96 of the UN Charter. So that is another option you have. And under that article, they will pass the case of Somaliland to the ICJ. Yeah. So there's three things you get out of it. That letter, and everything is based on law. So you get the narrative that Somalia is spreading that we're secessionists. You disprove that they're not even sovereign, they're UN trusteeship. That's the narrative of Turkey and them calling us secessionists. That's that. But number two is that you restore your sovereignty, because once they prove there's no union and they're not even sovereign, then you restore your sovereignty. And then you have the other one under Article 96, where they push your case to the ICJ. So that's why it's important for the Somaliland government really to speak up. Not only that, it's financially beneficial to you, because this error that the UN did, how is it possible that a country that is not a country but a UN trusteeship sits on a United Nations seat? The United Nations is there just to file paperwork, that's all they do. And they never, before they have to check if you have your independence, they have to check if you're sovereign, you know, and they have to check if there was even a union before you claim us, and they didn't do it. And because if you send that letter through a sponsor, it's on record, they legally have to respond to it. And then you get three outcomes. The first one is the narrative, so nobody will call us secessionists. The second one is, sorry, what was the second one? I will remind me. Sorry, I can't remember.
Not to call it. God. Is it breakaway or
No,
the lack of
you
union?
change the narrative. Oh yeah, second one, you restore your sovereignty. But the third one, the most important one, this is where the money is Article 96. They push it to the ICJ. And that's when you present your legal case. You get advisory opinion, but you can also present your legal case, And once that's done, it will expose all the errors of the United Nations allowing a UN trusteeship to sit on a UN seat. And that's why retrospective recognition is actually very, very important. It's very important. It proves that Somalia committed genocide against a sovereign people. They committed a war crime. So, yeah, we have nothing to lose, to be honest. I think once our government, I wrote a lot of stuff. So I hope our government sends the letter. And also, what is the point of having all these foreign relationships with different countries? Oh, we're going to Kenya, we're going to the UAE, America, we're trying to, I get it, it's good for the economy and open trade. But what you really want is for one of them to sponsor you to send a letter. And there are many lawyers, experts, people that are really good at this, that have studied the law and they know what they're talking about. And they will write a letter. That's all Somaliland has to do. Every letter, when they write the letter, it is backed up by law. And if once they don't find, and Somalia is not registered anywhere, so they don't really have a case. Somaliland has the case, So once they prove, and it's on record, once you get somebody sponsored, because in the past, I think
Yes,
Solano, so yeah, go ahead.
Lin Man, I wanted to kind of talk about one thing. We're aware of the what is called the UNTMS now, used to be called UNSOM, in 2012 Somaliland for not having a mandate. And also in 2013 they made the error of stating that Somaliland was part of the federal government of Somalia. Now, when you look at the previous President Silano was very active in making sure that Somaliland's territorial integrity is respected and that they were not able to claim it. At that very time, the UN the guy that was head of the UN representative came to Hargeisa and apologized for calling Somalia, for stating that Somaliland was part of Somalia's federal government, and he wrote a formal letter. I wonder how, if the UN is somewhat complicit, especially not a UN 2MS or UN AMSOM, is complicit with Somalia's activity, because if you were being informed and you apologized about making that mistake, you go to the UNTMS website today, they claim that Hargeisa and Somaliland are part of Somalia. These are stuff they apologized for, and again, these are documents you can find. The head of what was called the UN envoy for Somalia came to apologize in Hargeisa and was apologetic to Silanyo. What I don't understand today is we have someone like James Swan that would walk around Somalia, that would interfere within Somaliland's internal policies, dictate what Somaliland can and can't do, and our politicians are ignoring that. And the danger of this is very dangerous for our politician. And I always say this, I think for anybody to call Somaliland either secessionist or a breakaway is genocidal, because you are implying that it's okay to then attack Somaliland. These are the same grounds that the previous dictator has used. He called these people that they were secessionists, that they were trying to run away, they were anti-government, used all these different things, and the international community justified it, assuming that these people were anti-government and, the government was doing whatever that was correct. Now, I think we have to hold the international community accountable. If you see anyone calling Somaliland either breakaway or secessionist, I think there needs to be harsh words that is to be said, because that is putting 7.8 million Somalilanders at risk. But what is your opinion on UTMS, an organization that is a political organization, is there to build Somalia? Their job is to build the federal government of Somalia, but they seem to come and do everything that they meant to do in Somalia, in Somaliland, and then claim, and this is how they're able to get their funding from the international community. I was very happy to see these.
One of the to make it seem like Somalia is actually a government.
Yes,
and then the money goes to Mogadishu, and Somaliland see it. So they're being used. Basically.
Yeah, because sorry, Lim. So they'll do things like anti-terrorism, police drills, and how to deal with that. No terrorism. There are no terrorists within Somalia. We've dealt with this. We're just using 100K. I mean, America spent billions trying to, I'm not trying to dunk on America, but we know how to deal with this. So, Somaliland just used about 100K, and we're able to, secure get rid of all these terrorists and all that stuff, where, the West and all these organizations are getting paid and are getting so much money with anti-terrorism. But then you have them do anti-terrorism drills. They do things like, they do so many things that they should do in Somalia. They're also even doing the one man, one vote within, to vote for Somalia's constitution. Somalia claims Somaliland's, borders and land, and is trying to use Somaliland citizens to vote for this. And UNTMS is aware, but is complicit in that fraud. In this fraud, where they're telling the international, so it used to be UN ONSOM, it turned to UNTMS, because guess what? Somalia is doing so well. Yet Somalia in 2013, when they first were established, and they were there since 1991, but from 2013 until Somalia was recognized by America, the UNTMS claims that they're doing such an amazing work in Somalia. Somalia today still has Al-Shabaab. We're still controlling Mogadishu. They don't only have Al-Shabaab in Somalia now, they also have ISIS. They don't only have ISIS, they have ISIS and the Houthis working together. To any reasonable person, is Somalia in a better situation Somalia is in a worse situation than what it was in 2013? I think America was saying they spend about 9.8 billion a year. That's only America. There's so many other countries. What do you think about UNTMS? Why they're not being exposed? We're trying to do a campaign against them, because I think they ought to be exposed. This is using international funds from an international organization that are claiming to doing that, they are claiming they're claiming to be rebuilding Somalia. Yeah, every single things that they're supposed to be doing in Somalia, they only do it in Somaliland. Things like, training the police, things like that, they're not able to do in Mogadishu because it's not safe enough. What do you think, Lin Man?
Sorry, I was just trying to find all the laws they broke. I haven't found it yet, but they're breaking a lot of laws because they're not. Somalia has no sovereignty over Somaliland. They cannot prove it. There is no treaty. There is no union. It's not ratified. They have no legal justification to be in Somaliland. That is why they kissed Selania's feet, because he reminded them. Do you understand? So what we need now as a nation is really legal clarification on record, so that the whole world knows that these people are not part of our country. So that is really what Somaliland needs to do to fix this problem, because right now all they do is use our data, use our information, use our stability to prop up a foreign nation called Somalia. And then they apply for funding saying, oh, there's success here. And they use it in Somalia. And it's just a money laundering scheme at this point. We don't benefit from it at all. Why should we be associated with terrorism? We're not terrorists. So yeah, that's what I think.
Lima, and as you search, and I've grabbed a couple of other people to have. I don't want to make this space long, so I have grabbed two knowledgeable ladies to come along if they are happy to come along. Otherwise, it's fine. Lima, and
I found the laws for you that they broke.
Go on, then go ahead.
UN Charter Article 102. ATMIS cannot treat Somaliland as legally united with Somalia without a registered treaty, which does not exist. Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Violation is the so-called union between Somalia and Somalia violates Article 6 and Article 11 and 18, rules on how states consent to treaties. Any recognition by ATMIS of a non-existent legal merger violates treaty law. Also, there's a third one. It's called the African Union Charter, Article 4B, which is the respect for borders. Respect of borders existing on achievement of independence. So they're breaking that law. They're not respecting Somaliland. And by treating Somaliland as part of Somalia, ATMIS violates the African Union Charter by ignoring Somaliland's lawful legal borders. Also, the African Fact-Finding Mission of 2005. And then there is principle of non-impersonation, customary international law. State impersonation is when a state falsely represents another or submits documents falsely on their behalf. Somalia registered a fake union, so that is treaty law violation and a serious violation against sovereignty and international law. Then it's the Montevideo Convention. Somaliland is a judicial state on international law, and Somalia, before even Somalia even existed, ATMIS denial of this violates international legal norms regarding state continuity and legal personality. So the conclusion is there's a couple of laws: UN Charter Article 102, Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, AU Charter Article 4B, Fact-Finding Mission, Customary International Law, Montevideo Convention on Statehood. So ATMIS is breaking a lot of laws. I just looked it up right now. So yeah, that is the reason why if you get legal clarification, Somalia is not working on law. It doesn't operate. It is fraud. It is a fiction. It is neocolonialism. It is illegal what they're doing. And if you focus on law, the UN will apologize to you. But if you then get legal clarification on record, and we get our government of ours to send the letters off and find a sponsor state, you have it not only on record, but it will clear the narrative all over the world. And the questions are simple. You just ask them, where are the treaties of Somalia, 1st of July? Where is this so-called union? Probably another couple of questions you could ask them. I can't think of it right now. But all I'm saying is it will expose them. And once that is done, it will clear the narrative of the lies that they have told. And I think that's very
Thank
important.
you. Yes, I think that's extremely important. I do want to go after the UN ATMIS. I do see them as a white collar genocide. You know, you remember in 2024, you had James Swan talk about. He spoke about Somaliland. Was it no election, and Fiqi was also in the UN in the is it called UN Security Council meeting? UN Security Council meeting where they were discussing funds and they were trying to, beg the world for funds, and this is all the amazing work we've done. I found that so offensive, so offensive. Somaliland in 2003 had a power, they did an election where Daher Riale won by only 80 votes. At that time, from 2003 to how many, I think Somalia would have been about 10, 20, 15 years old, or maybe less than that. Someone do the maths, please. I can't do it. And it's even like being made, there's Hollywood movies that spoke about it, how the transfer of power was peaceful, how there was no transfer of power, sorry, at that time he became president by 80 votes, nobody challenged it. Obviously you can imagine the opposition really wanted to win by only 80 votes, and I challenge any other country in the world to have a president win by only 80 votes. I've seen Hollywood movies that have spoken about this, and I found it disgusting and actually appalling that James Swan would come in the UN Security Council and would lecture Somalilanders 20 years later, 21 years on how they should vote peacefully and how the power should be transferred peacefully. How dare you? How dare you tell us on what to do? We have created this without zero support from the international community. From in 1988, for 2 years, the international community absolutely ignored Somalia. The 1991, whatever it was called, Save Something in America, where they completely savagely killed so many Americans in Somalia, that there was zero support for Somaliland. We built this. How dare the UN think, or UN TMS believe that they had some sort of influence? And you had Fiqi, the foreign minister of Somalia, the failed entity, the UN entity that's, this project that's been created by Obama, that's been recognized by Obama, claim our hard work and our success. And then he came in Somali and spoke in Somali and then called Somaliland a secessionist. And he goes, as these little secessionists have done a voting, the world should not be, we have to just say congratulations, but we will end them. This is the kind of language that this Lord terrorist uses. And then we have the UNTMS who uses and fraudulently uses our data to rebuild Somalia, but actually they're not rebuilding Somalia because Somalia is in no better situation than what it was 20 years ago, 13 years ago, 40 years ago. They have 3 major terrorists that are working in that region. I find that appalling, and I find it disgusting and appalling that our government has not kicked them out. This UNTMS office ought to be closed as soon as possible before the end of 2025. They need to be out of this country. They need to be out of Somaliland. They should have been out a long time ago. They are enabling not only our genocide, they're enabling for Somalilanders not to have basic rights. They're stripping away from Somaliland from everything. They never talk about our human rights. They never talk about anything that's happening within Somaliland. You never see James Swan speaking about the problems. You never see James Swan. James Swan is the very man who claims Sol and Sanag are disputed regions. How dare you? How dare you? A place that has a defined borders that is within the African Union Charter, for you to come along and say that this is a disputed area between Somalia and some sort of state within Somaliland. So between Somaliland and some sort of state within Somalia, how dare you? I find that disgraceful, and this is me holding my government accountable. And we will talk about this, and we will re-educate our Somalilanders. We will not continue to be violated. Our people are not going to be stateless for much longer. This is 65 years too long. 26th of June is round the corner, and it's going to be 65 years too long. And for UNTMS, I think they need to be exposed. I'm so happy America is realizing that the UN is absolutely fraudulent. And even Elon Musk said that they ought to be defunded. Completely agree with him. I completely could not agree more. I think I'm really happy with this Trump administration. I mean, I hope they're doing well for the Americans, but they somehow are helping Africans at the same time, because they're calling out organizations like the UN who are just blood-sucking, all about greed. They even did a last point. I don't know if I've talked about it when I spoke about it when you went here, Aline Man. And I think, guys, visit Adna, the girl at the top, Adna Idris. They and the African Union are asking for reparation. They asked the African Union and the UN came together and they said, you know what? The funds that are coming from America, all this aid is stopping. The Europeans are realizing we're absolute fraud. They're not going to fund us. Let's ask for reparation on colonial borders. The very organizations that are supposed to be uplifting human rights have never spoken about the human violation in Somaliland. These very organizations have not invited Somaliland, a country that was under the British colonial power. It was a protectorate. We were not invited either to that sitting. It is a money-grabbing machine. 73% I think they were speaking about it, of the African Union comes from donation. It needs to be scrapped. This African Union thing needs to be scrapped, and I'll pass it back to Lima, and I think I've gone on for a bit too long. UNTMS.
Yeah, thank you.
What's your opinion?
We have a new request. Yeah, you are right. ATMIS is not keeping the peace. They are breaking the law. And they are violating us. So that is the undeniable truth. By treating Somaliland as part of Somalia, ATMIS is breaking international law. No treaty, no union, no consent. UN Charter Article 102 was violated. The Vienna Convention was ignored. The AU owns 2005 fact-finding mission was discarded, and the AU Charter 4B, respect for colonial borders, was just trampled on. ATMIS is not a neutral peacekeeper. It enforces a lie by aiding Somalia in impersonating a state and occupying territory it has no legal claim to. This is like more than technicality. It's textbook violation of international law and the violation of Somaliland sovereignty and the principles of the African Union's own foundational principles. Somaliland did not sign a treaty, Somaliland did not ratify a union, and Somaliland never consented to ATMIS operating on its soil under Somalia's name. So ATMIS, they can be held accountable, and the international community have to stop rewarding fraud. They need to stop sending money to them because it is fraud. They are the terrorists. They are killing themselves. So let them fix their own problem. And they need to stop calling it territorial integrity because it's state impersonation, it's treaty fraud, and it's the breach of every law that the peacekeepers are sworn to uphold. So yeah, thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Lynn Ma'an. I did want to talk about, I think we've spoken about majority of things. We talked about the African Union, we talked about the UN. I think we need to emphasize on the lack of territorial integrity. I think the international community needs to realize that this is fraudulent activity, this is a lie, and these claims ought to be challenged as soon as possible. I did want to ask you, Lynn Ma'an, as a Somalilander, I think you probably don't live in Somaliland. How does it, like you probably have family members that are there. How does it feel, and how do you see the human effects that a lack of real recognition has on Somalilanders? When you think of Somalilanders that's similar age to you, that don't have this access, what do you feel by, and what do we need? Sorry, I don't know if you could hear me, but as a human, as a Somalilander,
it on everybody, to be honest. Your parents will have country of origin Somalia, other one not Somalia. You're from Somaliland. Your kids will at least be born in the West, so they're like unaffected by it. You're born in the West. I have birth certificate, so like I'm unaffected by it. But at the same time, when they come on, when you call them, their number says Somalia 252. That's the code of Somaliland. That was given to us on the 26th of June, 252. Simple things. You use their shield, their banking systems. It's like, why is our government not trying to get legal clarification on the situation? I don't understand it. It does affect us quite badly, to be honest, because we don't want to be known as people from Somalia. Not at all. You know,
Man, but
Somaliland is not a
yeah.
breakaway region. Somaliland is a de jure sovereign state. It was recognized in 1960. There is no treaty, ratification, act of union. There was no legal extinguishment of Somaliland's sovereignty. Instead, Somalia, under a trusteeship, impersonates Somaliland at the UN without a union, spreading lies, registering a lie, and that is forgery under international law. So even when the Americans they impose like a travel ban, it has to distinguish between fact and fiction. You cannot apply territorial integrity if Somalia cannot produce a treaty under Article 102, a lawful union. They can't even prove their own sovereignty, 1st of July, to be honest. Yeah. So, yeah, Somaliland needs to just,
Basically, man. Yeah,
yeah.
I think for me, and I will speak for myself. I think I visited back home. I see my cousins and my family members. Would they have multiple degrees at some point because of the lack of jobs? The job competition is unreal. Very little jobs. We then have a large number of migration. We have, Somaliland always has a long history of, when you look at our ancestors, we had Jewish that are living in Somalia. We had all sorts of Arabs, Egyptians, Indians lived in
Also, sorry,
Somaliland.
Walala, don't forget this, yeah? If you are born in Somaliland, you cannot apply for asylum in the UK. Because waxa lagu oranaya dowlad baad leedahay, you have a government.
Can you say in English? Yeah.
Huh? So you are suffering because of your own success. Because of your success, you suffer. And then they send to Germany, Hassan Sheikh, talking about we're going to return people from Somalia, you know? So your own success is you're struggling because of it. Because anyone from Somalia can go anywhere. They know they come from a failed state. But they know that you have a president, an army, you have elections. They'll be like, one of them even said to me that when he tried
But Liman, to Britain and to them, you are somebody with a state. Britain does not realize when you are a Somaliland that you've got 26th of June, you're an independent country, you're a sovereign country, you're actually being occupied. So they assume you are somebody with a state. They don't realize that all
but
the
there's no
factions
jobs, so people come here to look for jobs and
but not jobs. I think for them, they're thinking you are from a stable region within Somalia. Do you know what I'm trying to? Do you know where I'm going with this? To them, they believe okay, Somalia is a mess. The rest of Somalia, but Somaliland, where you're from, seems to be stable. They're not realizing, yes, I am stable and I am the de jure sovereign state, but the world doesn't treat me like this. I was looking at British investors that wanted to invest in Somaliland, but the British embassies are not helping those people because there's so much uncertainty with a place that's not recognized. They might not be safe. They don't know much about it. They can't tell the difference between Somalia and Somaliland. It's sad to say that, and this is big part of it is our politician. Obviously, a big part of it is the lies that's been. Our politician can only fight so much lies. There's 65 years of lies. There's 65 years. Somaliland is being called a region. As soon as the so-called occupation happened, the so-called union, but there was no union, but the occupation happened, they referred to Somaliland, a country the size of England and Wales. They referred to that in the northern region. This is why you realize this is a genocidal entity. People don't call Zanzibar or the island, the eastern island of Tanganyika. Zanzibar is Zanzibar. But because there's no union and because they are state impersonating, it was very important for them to not treat you as a de jure sovereign state, and rather to treat you as a northern region. So the international community, they're looking at you, they're thinking, yeah, Somalia is very bad, but your side is peaceful. But they don't realize no NGOs can come to Somaliland, no investments, even when it comes to international funds are very, very limited. Majority of the funds are for the anti-terrorism, for Somalia. And really, these Somali politicians, you hear Farmajo, the previous president, he stole 2.2 billion from Somalia. that was gone. Then you have something like 18 million gone to his private account. Hassan Sheikh, within the first week, he stole 500k, and all that money comes from the international community for Somalia, including Somaliland. But we don't get any of it. We get the bad name, we get the bad reputation, we get everything that's negative with Somalia. We never get any recognition for the good achievements that we achieve. And I think we ought to talk about this and push for it. I think I've gone in a ramble, but I did.
Anything that Somaliland achieves, which is positive, the data goes to Mogadishu for them to beg for money. And then you don't see the money. So at this point, you're just being used. But we have to think about what is the solution for this. All of these problems is because of what? It's because Somalia uses our sovereignty and blocks any deals, trading deals that we might want to make. So that is the crux of the issue. It's Somalia using our sovereignty. So now other countries don't want to deal with us because of what Somalia is doing. And as you know, a sovereign de jure country never loses its legal status. It is permanent under international law, regardless of the political situation what Somalia is doing. So what is the solution to this? It's permanent. We know we're sovereign. So what do we do about it? Is it not trying to get legal clarifications from the UN and having some lawyers write a good letter for Somaliland and then sending it through a sponsor state? And then once that is cleared, there wouldn't be these problems anymore. Foreign countries would want to deal with us because they know we're not part of Somalia. It will change the narrative, the story, and the forward. And we will no longer be called successionists. People find jobs, investments, trades, everything. So I think that is the solution, really.
Absolutely.
But also, I wanted to mention something before I forget, Somaliland is not looking for that, by the way. It's looking for political recognition versus like fighting for the legal sovereignty. It already has. It is acting like a de facto, wanting to find recognition instead of fighting for regaining its sovereignty, which under international law, they already have. And under international law, statehood is not defined by how many countries recognize you. So yeah, we already have.
Yes. Yeah. Lean Ma'an, to our listeners, I'm going to cut short and I will say this finally because it is Eid and I want people to celebrate. But I am going to open on Sunday. Lean Ma'an and everyone is welcome. Sunday, I will be opening my platform and we're going to talk about financial funds and where those funds go. I think Sleva is not here, but he will be helping me with that. We have to discuss this. I did want to finish with Somaliland's coastal guard 1 trillion. 1 trillion of the world's money goes through our sea. Our guards we do not get any benefit from that. We don't get any no thank you, no funds, no nothing. As a country that's financially restricted, a country the world does not recognize, we are still protecting 1 trillion of the world's economy. We have a piracy in the Indian Ocean. The world seem to be invested a lot of money there and are paying actors like, I think, is it China or India and a few other countries that are protecting that side of the world. When they're getting paid to do that, we don't get no funds when it comes to protecting the Gulf of Aden. We then have the Houthis now, and they're doing whatever they are, problems that they're causing on that region. Again, we get no support from that. I do want to end it with for me, what gives me the passion to come on and speak about Somaliland. Not only because, yes, as I am, I'm glad to be, I'm British, yes, but I'm also a Somaliland. That's my heritage. That's my story. That's my country. That's where my parents are from. And I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of both of my heritages. But I speak for my people that are voiceless. I speak for Somalilanders that are my age, that have no jobs. I speak for Somalilanders that are girls that are dying because, childbirth. We have so many kids that just die at childbirth. We are going through we're in such a primitive era when it comes to our health services. We have no health service. We're lacking in jobs. We have, when I talk about, imagine 75% of 30-year-olds not working, no jobs. You then have your passports, and you can't use your passport to international anywhere besides, for example, you can't go to Saudi. I think UAE is a good friend of ours that you're able to use that passport. But I'm trying. When you try and leave the country legally to be an economical migrant, even that is so difficult for young Somalilanders. So then you have people that are crossing, the borders, that are going to try and come to Europe and lose their lives. And I can understand many British people would be frustrated because, yes, I live in the UK and we are suffering with the large migration. It's not great. At the same time, as somebody who is from that region of the world, I understand for somebody to make that journey is because there's nothing. There's no jobs. There's nothing. You have a country that is the size of England and Wales. You have so many. If you're privileged enough to even get an education, you're then not going to be privileged. You might not get a job. For some people, they don't even have the chance to have an education. You could be, there's the whole, there's human disasters. What is it called now? Like droughts could happen. Again, we get no funding. We are affected by droughts. We're affected by climate change. Other countries in Africa are getting support by the international community. We don't. So then we have so many people that have lived in the nomads, that have, all they have was one meal a day. And imagine losing that due to something, it's what's happening to Somalilanders is criminal. Not only have they faced 30 years of occupation, a serious 10 years of a genocide for a certain group, but when you talk about Somaliland for those 30 years, yes, one group was genocided, but the rest of us we're not able to build in our regions. We're not allowed to have a house that's more than a 2-store. You have to come to Mogadishu and build that. Your passport had to be all the way in Mogadishu. Jobs and universities, you can dream about those, will not. This is why you see many of the people that have immigrated to the UK in the early 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, the 80s, in the 90s. It would be people that are from Somalia, and some were economical migrants. Others were people that are escaping genocide. You then see it 30 years on. We live in a peaceful place. We live in a place that is, we used to be called, the land of print, a place where, economy and investment was a thing, was a vibrant cities. Today, there's nothing because of these sanctions that we are suffering from. And I think it's unfair that for 65 years, we are paying the price of an occupation. We have to put it simply, is an occupation, and we should not be paying that price. I am going to shout, and we're going to speak about this every day. Our voice should be heard. Firstly, we're holding these government accountable. That's not taking legal action. We are also going to hold institutions like corrupt institutions like the African Union or the UN, the African Union that is ignoring the fact finding and our legal right for re-recognition for political reasons. We should not be 7.2 million should not be stateless. 7.2 million people should not be under threat of a genocide, of a second genocide by Turkey and by other parties. And lastly, the international community invested so much money in protecting their goods when it came to piracy within the Indian Ocean. With the involvement of China and Turkey, you can imagine the devastation that will happen if you allow 2 genocidal criminals and a genocidal entity that is a regime in Mogadishu if those people are weapons, they shouldn't even, arms embargo ought to be returned to Somalia. But if you provide those with weapons again, you can imagine the devastation that will cause into the Indian Ocean, on the Gulf of Aden. So are we going to try and get rid of Houthis and get another group of people that are trying to survive? Anyway, I digress. I'm going to give it the credit and I'm going to close down, inshallah. Lean Ma'an, unless you have any last final words, Walalo.
Let's talk about solutions. Solutions to the Turkey problem. Solutions. So let's bring it full circle. So Somalia for over 60 years has been impersonating Somaliland on the world stage, forcing documents, absence of treaties, confusion, pretending, a union happened. And there's always going to be a way out, and that is called retrospective recognition. So, what is retrospective recognition? Retrospective recognition is when the international community acknowledges a state not as new, but as the one that had always had legal sovereignty. You know, correcting false historical narratives. I think that is the solution for Somaliland, and that's what I want to conclude with. We need to get our government to write a letter to the United Nations General Assembly. We need them to find a sponsor country, and we need them to, get help from lawyers with the letters. And that's what we want, because we want to set the record straight. Because once we prove that there is no union, it is on record because it's through a sponsor state and it is filed. So we want it on record. We want the records to be corrected, clarification. And after that, the doors are open for us. We can either push them to take it to the ICJ. We can push them to reinstate our sovereignty and accept the fact that there is no union beyond the 26th of June. So there's many options for us, and it's all very good. And I think we should conclude with that. There's ways out, and we need our government to take action because genocide is really knocking on your door. You have states that are not even verifying whether or not Somalia is even a country. They're not even asking them for a union treaty. They're not even asking them for evidence that they have sovereignty over Somaliland, and they're behaving criminally. So to protect our people, the people that we love, and our families, we humbly ask them to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn Ma'an. It is a matter of life or death. I think at this stage there is, I think Somalia is very openly stating what it wants to do. So is Turkey. It's dangerous, and I think for us it's a matter of life or death. And I think we want the support from our government, but most importantly, we also want support from the international community. Thank you, guys. Thank you to Heritage, the voice of the people. We appreciate this place, and maybe next time, because it's Eid, I thought I'd cut it short. Inshallah, next time we can hear the voice of Somalilanders, we can hear the stories and the effect of the lack of re-recognition and ignoring our de jure statehood and the effects it has on our people and as humans. Because many times people just think of Somalia, they think of things like technically, you're not, you can say, oh, it's not recognized, we will recognize them. I've seen a statement where someone said, oh, America will recognize Somaliland in 2028, in 2028. And I was like, that's 3 years time. That is such a long time. And I don't think we have that kind of time. And I think, I hope our government takes a quicker action. So again, you are with Heritage, voice of the people. Thank you so much, and happy Eid.
Eid Mubarak, everyone. Eid Mubarak.